Hi, everybody. Mark Victor Hansen here, and I'm excited to share with you somebody I got to meet just a short time ago out in Oklahoma. My wife and I were going to talk at Esther Women's Conference with about 400 or 500 women, and it was great. But the night before, we had dinner, and this lady sat elegantly at our table, and then I heard her story, and I thought, oh my goodness gracious, that is a great story that the world needs to hear. And today, you're going to get to hear it live and in person, and I want you to, even before she mentions her book, I'm going to tell you want to have it because it is a great read. And especially if you've got daughters or granddaughters like I do, it is an especially good read. Sherri Coale is a superstar her whole life. Personally, professionally, she's been a basketball coach. She's been at the University of Oklahoma doing superstar stuff. And what we're going to talk about today, we're going to start at a very high level, if you don't mind. We're going to start with your philosophy. Would you mind sharing your philosophy of basketball and women's sports, if you would, please?
I don't know that I have that down to a nice, succinct four-word statement for you there, Mark. I can tell you that I used the game of basketball as a vehicle for teaching young women how to live. That was what we did. Our mission statement was to grow kids, and that was we wanted to learn and improve, grow as people and performers while we were pursuing championships. That was the purpose that we talked about all the time. And so from a really high level, that's my philosophy of basketball. Now, if you want to really talk about the game, that'll take more time than we have because I have all kinds of thoughts about that.
I know, but when I traveled around the world talking with Jim Rohn, literally, he always said everyone's got to figure out what their philosophy is. And you're one of the few that have not only had a historical philosophy and a philosophy of growth, is obviously you and I are in the same business with different I was doing growing people's businesses and tenfolding and hundredfolding. And you did that. You took people that weren't sure of themselves, and suddenly you created self-worthfulness in them, and you use the sport as a background. So talk a little bit about that, and then we'll talk about the future of your philosophy too, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I think for young people, what I wanted to do every day was give them something hard to do, because that's how confidence is developed. That's how you figure out who you are and how you want to go about navigating things. That's why sport is so great, because it offers up all these instantaneous, unpredictable hurdles and potholes. Things just pop up in your path, and you got to figure out what to do about it. How do you get around them? How do you get over it? How do you stay whole while you do that? All those things happen, and the public comes in droves and watches, and they think you're just trying to put a ball in that goal and keep somebody else from keeping one out of that. And it's not. It's about something so much bigger than that. But that's the great reward of coaching too, is that the outcome isn't on the neon scoreboard at the end of a game, nor is the outcome at the end of a season. Even if you get to cut down a net or go to the Final Four, as we got to do 3 times, which is just an amazing experience, that's not the outcome. The outcome is a player gets married and sends you an invitation to her wedding, or calls you one day and says, hey, I can't decide which job I should take, or calls one day and says, Coach, I'm getting a divorce. I don't know what to do. Those are the outcomes that people know how to, young women learn how to navigate the roughness of life, because it's hard. It's just hard.
That's why I love your book, because what it does, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that are listening with an inner ear and an outer ear, you're seeing that this lady deals with 360 degrees of growth, and she doesn't do a student because they're 18 to 21 or so in school. She's dealing with them for their whole life. And that's what, competitive sports is all about. And what is the difference between men's and women's basketball, philosophically and otherwise?
Well, there are quite a few differences, even though we try to be exactly the same sometimes. And I think that's a huge mistake. The women's game has its own unique traits, identifying factors, styles of play, things that make it specifically easy to stick to. It's in some ways, because it's played so much below the rim. Of course, we have some people that can dunk and do things, incredibly athletic things, but by and large, it's played below the rim. So it's like old school basketball, where the ball moves here, there, boom, and then all of a sudden somebody gets a layup without it ever hitting the floor. That's a really cool facet of the women's game that I don't think gets talked about enough. When you talk about differences, there are plenty of those in how you coach men and how you coach women, and how they look at themselves and how they build a team. I've had friends who coach men their entire life, and then they coach their daughter's team, and they're like, I can't believe how hard these guys work. Yeah. Get a bunch of women together and give them something hard to do and watch them come together and figure it out and do amazing things, and their commitment level, loyalty level, all those things. And then there's the tough side too, the relationship side. Men can go head to head in practice and be as angry or as competitive or as intense as they want. And the second it's over, go get a pizza together. And women do that, and it might take several hours or a couple of days before they want to go get an ice cream cone together. It's just the way it works. And so you have to kind of know how to navigate all that.
First of all, I love it. I want to go back to the first thing you said in this philosophical difference. I'm more of a guy that wrote books my whole life and I didn't have time to do sports because I had to work and make money to stay alive and pay my way through school. So forgive me for coming out at a little bit different level, but some of those people that are watching are going to be intellectuals, and they've never been to a basketball game. So I want to make sure that you and I invite them to one, because I didn't know how much I love it. And when you see what you were saying, the grit, the guts, the tenacity, the speed with which basketball moves, and the fact that no matter who you are, sweat is going to be pouring out every core of your being. And if you are lucky to know somebody like my dear friend here and get to sit in the court and watch that and experience it, that's great. And if you got a family member that's playing that you're supportive of, that even bolsters it more. And if they win, you have one kind of level of feeling, because you're talking about feeling nature here with the women. And if they lose, then how do you support them? What did you do to rebolster their self-initiative to action if they lost the game?
You spend your entire career and their entire careers teaching them that what they do is not who they are. And separating those two things is so incredibly important. If they are not identifying with how they perform, how many points they score, how many minutes they play, whether or not we win, if their identity is not tied to that, they recover pretty quickly. It's just something that they do. If their identity is wrapped up in that, it's a whole other deal. And it's hard. You think about at the college level, the players that you get, they're the best player from their high school. Always at the division level, every player we ever signed was the best player at her high school. And many times she came to our campus carrying the weight of that high school, the weight of that program, the weight of that community, sometimes the weight of a state. The expectation that they took with them was enormous. And it's hard to play basketball and be fast and savvy when you're carrying all that stuff. And so expectation is a very real deal, Mark. And I write a lot about that in the book, The Compost File. I write about it because I think I even experienced it, as this is my second book. And my first book, there were no expectations. There had been no path carved. And so whatever I did was okay. I mean, it had to be, obviously it had to make sense, and it had to tie together, and it had to be well put together, and it had to be grammatically correct, but it was new. And then now you have an expectation. Can the second book be as good or as powerful as the first? Expectation is a very real thing. And the final story in The Compost File is a letter to my hometown, the small town in southern Oklahoma where I was raised. And it's really a thank you letter for their expectations.
Well, talk about, first of all, talk about your first book. What is the title of it again?
Rooted to Rise.
And what did it do for the reader?
I hope, I think, I believe that it made people think about the people in their lives who had made them who they are. It's a collection of stories about the people whose path intersected with mine, from family members to teachers, to my children's teachers, to my coaches, to my mentors, all people who I picked up little bits of Micah from through the years. And together they made me who I am. And the primary feedback that I received from readers who read Rooted to Rise was, I'd be driving to work couple of weeks after I finished the book, and I think about my uncle. And I clean the garage and I mow the grass the way I do because of my uncle. And I don't think I ever really put that together or told him that. And so I picked up the phone and I called him and I told him how much I appreciate him. That's the kind of stuff that makes me glad I spent the time to write the book. It makes me very, very proud, because we all have people. Rooted to Rise is a book about my people, but everybody has some. And so my hope is that it has made people think of theirs.
Well, one of the things I love about Oklahoma, and as you know, we own real estate there, and we come and see you guys a fair amount because there's a lot of good authors in your great state, like you and like our friend Jim Stovall, and that, who's creates movies out of, he's magic, a blind guy who's making #1 movies, just beyond amazing and steeped with wisdom. But what I see in Oklahoma as an outsider, not somebody born there like you do, there's real family, there's real continuity, there's real knowingness. Everybody knows everybody, all the way when we sat at dinner to the governor's wife, and you all are friends, and that's why it's so nice that you went back to your hometown. Now talk about this great title of yours on the book we just did at Mark Victor Hansen Library with you, which I think it's so wonderful. It is an illuminating title because it solicits, it drains the curiosity, and you say, what does that mean?
So it's called The Compost File: Stories for the Striver in Us All. So here's where that came from. For years, I kept a file on my desktop computer labeled compost. And in it, I just threw things. If I came across a paragraph that inspired me, I'd toss it in there. If I had a thought about something I wanted to write about and explore, I'd throw it in there. Sentences from here and there, thoughts, whatever, challenges, things I couldn't figure out. Bad writing, good writing, the whole 9 yards. It just dumped everything in the compost file. And I was going through it one day and I thought, I should elaborate on this thought because I'm not really sure what I think about it. It's made me curious. And so I started writing, and I found that as I picked those threads of curiosity in the compost file, I created a series of blogs that I posted on my website. I have a blog called A Way of Life. And then I would get feedback from people who read the blogs saying this hit at just the right time in just the right way. You know, I just took my last child, my baby child, to school, and it's a rite of passage for me. And I read this blog, and you get me, you know how it felt. And so I collected those for a while, and I thought maybe there's a through line in all of this. And I started reading through the blogs and thinking about this various stages of life and the situations and predicaments we find ourselves in. And through lines began to develop. And so in a conversation I had with Sweet Carol at your company, she asked me if you had an avatar, who would your avatar for this book be? And what would that person look like? And I started thinking in my mind, I'm thinking, well, it's for me. I'm writing it for me because I figured out a lot of things by writing, which is what we know the practice does for us. But I thought, well, it's for parents, and it's for coaches, and it's for athletes, and it's for teachers, and it's for sisters. And after a bit, I thought, you know what? It's for strivers. It's just for people who aren't okay with settling. It's just okay.
No one should be.
It's for people who scratch and try to itch. You have an itch and try to scratch it. You know, they want to reach just a little bit further, do a little bit better, feel a little bit more. And it doesn't matter what you do, or whether it's your job or your personal life or an encounter with your child, just people who want to be a little bit more aware, notice a little bit more thoroughly, and live a little bit more fully. And so that's where For the Striver in Us All came about as a subtitle.
By the way, and I don't know that it fits here. I never heard Carol's question before, but she is obviously our esteemed executive editor, and we think the world of her. But if I were answering that question for you, I would have personified it by two people. One is Reba McEntire, who has, got your hair except red, and has done so well in music. And she won the Horatio Alger Award like I did, which is rare. I mean, we only have one woman probably win out of 10 people that get it in the Supreme Court per year. I would guess. I don't know for sure. I don't think, maybe we had two once or twice. But and then the other one, because of what you're writing, the compost pile, I'd say when Jack and I were coming through, Jack had been at Harvard with Gail Sheehy, who wrote Passages. And Passages, obviously, I get goosebumps. Look at that. Is it your book is exact? Forgive me for, I don't know that you should compare, but that was a #1 book, Passages. And what it was is about, here's what happens at different gestation levels of your life. And one more thing, and I don't hope I'm not over waxing on your stories here, but my little daughter was becoming a veterinarian, and undergraduate, she did evolutionary biology, and somebody came up to her and said, well, what in the heck is that? I said, well, at 9 months, a little girl's walking, at 12 months, little boy's walking. It's pretty much universal around the world, 8 billion people. And that's what you do, is you're taking through the passages. That's why when people read your blog, they said, holy cow, her story is my story, because everybody's story has which the big word is verisimilitude, some exact similarity to everybody else's story. So what is your favorite story out of the compost pile so far? And by the way, you're going to get feedback from other people that say, that's not the best one. This is the best one.
It's like asking me, I get asked all the time, what was your favorite team or your favorite moment in your 25 years at Oklahoma or your favorite child? And I only have two, so I got 50% chance of getting that right.
Never get it right with the other one.
It's so hard to say because each of the stories, and they really are, they're just stories. I love to tell stories. I think that goes back to my background as a coach, that you try to get things to stick with your players by wrapping it in a story because people remember stories. And it depends on where you are at any given point in time. I'm going to tell you three that really resonate or come to top of mind to me when I think about all the stories in the book. One I mentioned already, which is the last story, which is a thank you letter to Hilton, Oklahoma, which is the small town that raised me. Another is
that story. Go deep in that story. Why would you write them, and why? And for sure they'd all read it because you're the town heroine.
I'm on the water tower. I went back home to Hilton to speak at a Chamber of Commerce dinner. One of those things that if you can get it in your schedule, they ask you, and if you can possibly make it work, you make it work because they're the town that raised you. And when I drove back into town, I was just overwhelmed with emotion. My parents haven't lived there in a while, and I don't go back very often. It had probably been 5 or 6 years since I'd been even driven through the town, and I just was overwhelmed with emotion. The main emotion being gratitude, the familiarity of everything. Even though so many of the people who played key roles in my life have either passed or they've moved away. They weren't there, but everything in the town screamed of them to me. And when I went to that chamber dinner, everybody in the small town is there and you reconnect. And while I was talking, I was looking at faces and thinking, man, I remember when you talked about integrity being you stop at the stop sign in the middle of the night, whether anybody sees you or not. I just, all these stories were just popping back from my teachers, from people I went to church with, from my neighbors. And on the way home, on the drive back home, it's about an hour and a half drive to where I live now. I just was sort of cataloging all the things that I was grateful for. And when I got home that night, I just sat down and wrote a letter that I posted as a blog, just a thank you to the town. And it's for things that are pretty much unseen, like high expectations. Like no one in the town ever told me, you need to get to the gym and get your shots up if you want to be an all-stater, because I wanted to be an all-state basketball player. No one ever told me that. No one ever said, oh, did you go to the gym today? No one ever did that. But there was this feeling there that you could do anything you wanted to. And so it was sort of a lidless jar. You were welcome to try whatever you wanted to try. And I've often said that I feel like my confidence came from Hilton, Oklahoma, because what they did was just give us things that we had to do and we had to figure it out. I went to a really small high school, so I loved basketball. I was the best player on the team. I scored the most points. Yay. I also sang in the choir. I wasn't the best singer. I was also in the school play. I wasn't the best actress. You just did things because if you didn't do them, they didn't get done. And so I left Hilton feeling like there's not anything I can't do. I felt like I knew what it was like to be the one carrying the load on the basketball team. I knew what it was like to win a state championship in track and be the third fastest runner on the team, not the fastest runner. I knew what it was like to sing in the choir and be the alto because nobody else had a deep enough voice. And that's about the only reason. I mean, just, you just figure it out and you walk away and you think I can figure out most anything that's thrown in front of me.
So before we go to the other two stories, we got to stay on this because there's a lot of, I want to unwrap it if you don't mind. And you're allowed to say, I don't want to do that. But first of all, don't you think everybody ought to write a letter to their hometown, even though they're not going to get to do the kind of stuff you and I have been so blessed to get invited to our alma mater or school, home, town, city, county, state, whatever. If everybody wrote that thank you letter, because the more you're grateful for, the more you get to be grateful for. You and I know that because I sat with you at dinner with Crystal, my beloved wife, and we knew how grateful you were. And everybody at the table lived in gratitude, as far as I'm concerned, when we got together. So talk about why everyone might be inspired at the depth of it. They'll read your thank you letter and they'll go, I never was thankful for, like you said, walking down the streets, and you had very little anonymity, but there's somebody who says, I love the title, right? I don't know if you can see the screen like I can. You may not. Are you getting the screenshots of what people are writing to us? Because there are people listening around the world that are my colleagues that will become yours in a few minutes and buy your book, of course. So tell me about that. Don't you think everybody ought to write a thank you letter to their beloved home city, assuming they loved it, or state?
I think even if they didn't, I think everybody should have a writing practice. I talk about this all the time. I made our players do it. I think that there is such value in having to organize your thoughts, taking the time to put something down on paper. You don't have to write it in such a way that anybody could ever read it. It doesn't have to be, perfect grammatically. It doesn't have to be polished up. You don't have to do 12 rewrites of it, but pouring your thoughts from your head to the paper has a sort of magic to it. And I say, if you loved your hometown or if you didn't, one of the things we sometimes did with our players was we would write a thank you note to an opponent who we lost to. We would write a thank you note to an injury that we didn't want to have, obviously, because of what we get to learn when you go through those things. Thank you for teaching me about patience and that there are other ways to lead. Thank you for teaching me about preparation and the value of the process over the outcome, all those kinds of things. So I think even if, I won the lottery with a family. I was born into an awesome family. I won the lottery. Not everybody did.
Nope.
My thank you notes to my family would be different than maybe your thank you notes to your family or someone else's, but we all have gratitude to express for our circumstances because they teach us. I know that the way you came to the life that you enjoy now was arduous. It was not easy at the beginning or the middle. I know it wasn't. And you're probably very grateful for those extents you had to go through, those things you had to do to get to where you are now. And so you can find gratitude if you're looking for it. And the more you look for it, the more you find it, the more you write about it, the more you get to be grateful for.
Yeah. And thank you for Diane for writing in from Alabama. Hey, so first of all, talk about we'll still get back to the two stories. I won't forget anything. I promise. I get to open the loop and then keep opening the loop. And
you're good.
My mind is really, well, remember, I got to tell you, when I first wrote 1 Minute Millionaire, and we had an editor at Random House, and she could say page 386, those two paragraphs need to be on page 27, and she'd shuffle it in front of me. And I thought, my God, I wrote this and I can't do what you do. But every one of us has got different talent, and it just is fun. But talk about just briefly your sibs and your mom and dad, why you guys got along so well.
Well, my parents were divorced when I was a little girl. I was one. So I don't even remember them being together. The ACEs exam, I say a lot when I'm speaking, that on the adverse childhood trauma scale, you get low score wins. It's like golf. You don't want to have a very high score. And they give you 10 questions, and it sort of scales out how you'll react to certain things that happen in the world based on your history with trauma. And I'm a one. I'm a one because my parents were divorced. That's one of the questions. Do you come from a broken home? But I'm really like a 0.5 because my parents both lived in the same small town. They both came to all my games, all my parent teacher conferences, all the school plays and the choir rehearsals, all those things. We got along. Everybody got along. I had 2 houses, 2 closets, 2 Christmases. I mean, come on. I won the lottery. My grandparents lived in town. I had a great relationship a special relationship with my granny, who eventually became the nanny to my children when they were small. I have one brother who was my biggest fan, always, a couple of years older, and always my fan in all my sporting events. He was my rock, and we still have a great relationship today. So I feel so lucky that I grew up in a home that was absent not only of trauma, but also drama. We just went to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And I walked to school, and everybody in town supported each other. And it was just very idyllic.
Well, I'm going to unwrap it. And I know we still got two stories. We got a lot to cover yet here. But what happens is when somebody hears what an ideal family looks like and what it is, it'll inspire other people to raise their standards. Because right now, a lot of people don't have any family standards. They don't have any SIB standards. They don't have any grandkid standards. And I'm saying that, thank God for your granny who became your nanny, and what a nice cliche, and
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And the other thing that it does, as I unwrap what you say, if you don't mind, is that both of us came from small towns, and there's a benefaction to that. When you're I lived in New York City, as you know, for 7 years, and when you're in New York City, you're a nobody. Because there's 18 million people, and there are a lot of famous people, and it doesn't matter who you are and how big you are. There's always somebody bigger, better, stronger, richer, more famous. But in your own small town, everybody has got a relationship with you. Everybody. I mean, it's wonderfully exciting.
I use a line in that thank you note to my hometown. That's the final story of the book, and it's evidence that a whole bunch of people cared. And that's what expectation was to me. Anywhere I went in town, somebody was watching and could tell my mom or my granny what I did or didn't do, good, bad, or otherwise. I knew that the circle was small. It was tight. It felt like you could never hide. That's not a cross to bear. That's an invitation to soar. And I felt so thankful that a whole bunch of people cared about how I behaved and how I grew up and what I did. And that's such a compliment. And I don't think growing up that I knew that at the time, because that's all I knew. And then you grow up and you live in a city and you realize that not everybody gets that. And it's a pretty special thing. And I think that's partly why I wanted to acknowledge that publicly in the way that I did in the book, because it is rare, it's extraordinary. And those of us who are blessed by it are very, very lucky.
Well, let me just say, because I know some of your student basketball players, and you gave them, to use your line a second ago, the ability to soar, which is really nice, because inwardly, I believe, you and I believe in the Christian model totally, is that everybody is supposed to grow, develop, be fully functioning, healthy, happy, joyous, and productive and contributing. So what is the second story?
Well, it's the first story of the book, and it's about possibility. And the story inside the story is when my daughter was in pre-K, she came home one day with a stick that was about this long. It was like a branch off a tree, a little stick though, kind of gnarly. And it had bright colored pipe cleaners and ribbon and a marble tied on it. And I could tell there was a story there. And I said, "Oh, Chan, I love your stick. What is it?" And she said, "It's a possibility stick." And she's 4. And I said, "Okay, so what does it do?" And she said, "It makes things possible." And I said, "So like a magic wand?" And she just looked at me and she said, "No, it's for real stuff." I could not wait to get to parent teacher conference to ask the pre-K teacher about this idea of possibility stick. I thought it was the most amazing thing I've ever heard for a young teacher to do for a brand new student. And she said, "Possibility stick?" And I said, "Yeah, the tree branch with all the stuff on." And she's like, "Oh, those are talking sticks." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, so that when they get it, they know it's their turn to talk. So it teaches them how to be in school." She goes, "But I may start calling them possibility stick because that is really cool." And we laughed about it at the time. And I have the possibility stick on a shelf in my house now. We kept it through all these years. My daughter's 29 years old. It's what I would look at when a road was about to bend and I didn't know where it was going. I can't tell you how many times I just walked down the hallway and thought, I'm going to go down the other hallway and take a look at the possibility stick because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And it sort of became that bastion, if you will, that thing that said, maybe what happens next is going to be incredible. Even if it's not what I expected or what I wanted, maybe it's going to be incredible. And that's sort of the crux of story 1.
Well, first of all, I love this story. But second of all, as a marketing guy, I got to tell you got an opportunity here to market something great. You ought to sell possibility sticks.
That means I'd have to go out in my yard and make them.
I'm not talking about the manufacturer, although we could get AI to do that and robot Optimus by Elon. But the fact of the matter is that would sell on QVC, which is something where we're going to go possibly yet and talk. But I love the possibility stick. It is a great first story of your book. It's one of the things that, ladies and gentlemen, when you start to read this, you're going to find out it's a page turner, and you're going to start and not stop, because she personifies, in my mind, the other person. I said two already, but the third one I'd say is Irma Bombeck. And Irma Bombeck said, if life is a bullet carries, why am I always in the pits? That's what you do, is you make sure you don't stay in the pitch. You make sure you got the cherry and the joy and the ecstasy and the exalted radiance and glorification of life. Third story, please.
It's a story I wrote about Coach Knight, Bob Knight, the amazing men's basketball coach at Indiana University. A lightning rod of an individual. You either loved him or you hated him. I knew him personally. I know his wife. I knew him as a young coach. I modeled so much of what I did, watching his videotapes, reading his manuals, anything I could get. Loved how his teams played defense. Wanted my teams to play that way. I loved how they played motion offense. I wanted to teach our players how to do that, because it's about understanding the game, not memorizing plays or patterns. Anyway, when Coach Knight passed away, the day that he passed away, I had just turned on the TV. I'm in Oklahoma City, where the Oklahoma City Thunder are an amazing NBA team, and they're having an incredible year and so fun to watch. And so I had just turned on the TV to catch the Thunder game. And right off the bat, Josh Giddey threw a backdoor pass, and it was just amazing underneath the defense. And I immediately thought Bob Knight, because that's the way Coach Knight taught people to play basketball. And all of that sort of congealed in my brain that evening. And I sat down and wrote a story about Bob Knight and the things that you can learn from people if you pay attention, the things that they stand for. It's not a you should love him, you should hate him piece. It's this is who he was, and this is what he did, and this is what he taught, and this is what I was fortunate enough to take away from him and the way he taught the game. And so I guess I use that as my third one, because it's such a close connector to my previous life of being the head women's basketball coach at the University of Oklahoma. Coaching basketball is what I did for over 30 years. And so it's really a tribute to that passion that doesn't go away. It just gets set on the edge of a desk for a while. I carried my passion to write in my pocket for over 30 years while I coached. And so now they've just traded places. I do the writing, and the coaching passion sits over here. But that story is particularly near and dear to my heart for those reasons.
We'll talk about the leadership that you saw, because what happens is we all need to imitate until can emulate, match, and surpass. And you saw him as Knight as one of the great, and it truly was. I think he's still alive, as far as I know.
No,
right?
He passed.
He did. Okay. Defensive coach. But what did you, because you were so good at writing, did you, not only in the story, but did you, when you were studying him, did you write down everything that he was doing? And so you knew how it was being passed, and surreptitiously, so to speak.
Oh, I'm a copious note taker. I have notebooks full of Bob Knight clinics where I set up, on the 95th row in a random gym in California and listen to him teach from the court below. But what I think what resonated most with me about Coach Knight was he had such high expectations of his players, and he taught them the game. He wanted them to understand it. He didn't want them to do something, and this is contrary to the popular opinion about him, but he didn't want his players to do things because he said to do it. He wanted them to do things because they understood why they were doing it and how it could be effective. So there's this very obvious teaching element to Coach Knight, and I gravitated toward that. I loved the freedom of his motion offense, because what it basically said was there's no roof on how good you can get at this. It's 5 people on the floor. Whatever they can think, imagine, see, and have the skill set to do, they can do together. And so it might look like this for one group and like this for another. You get to decide. There's such, opportunity in that. I loved coaching that way and playing that way because it could always get better. You could always get better. And maybe that's the striver in me, but I felt like our players always had a chance to, no matter how well they played, to always play a little bit better because they could understand it a little more deeply. And that was one of the hallmarks of Coach Knight's teaching.
Well, I think it's yours too, because you wanted them to grow and maximize their potential. And that's, other than sports, most people don't get intensive about what is your 100% potential. And only because I've become addicted as a late bloomer, so to speak, in basketball. I'm addicted to, with my grandson, who's a superstar and plans, I've told you at 12 years old, he plans on at 18, he'll make 30 million being a Phoenix Sun, and then he's going to manage them. And then I said, and then what? Not thinking he'd have an answer. 12 said, then I'm going to buy him. I said, that's 3.8 billion, and Grampy's not doing that. He makes his own money, so he's got to earn. He washes windows and dog sits and house sits when people are on vacation. So I'm very proud of him. Tell me how you take even the best out of every high school and tell them we're going to work hard, we're going to be diligent. But what was your leadership model to bring out the extraordinary in them such that you would win all those games?
Well, you used the key word already, model. Leadership is about what you do. It's not what you say. And so it had to be modeled by myself and my staff. And then the captains of the team were held to an extraordinarily high standard because they were to model what we believed in, those core values that were most important to us. And it was always more about how we did it than what happened at the end. I would ask our guys after games in the locker room, do you think that we played in such a way so that when people left the arena and walked to their cars, they're thinking, tomorrow I want to be a better version of myself? Because if that's what they did, I don't care what the score was. We won. If that's not what they did, I don't care what the score was. We didn't win. That was our purpose, was to play in such a way that people were inspired to do more, to be better. And as long as that was our goal, then we could stay in line. I think about it like a bowling lane. We could stay in our lane, which was where we could control things. We couldn't always control if the other team made a whole bunch of shots. We couldn't always control if we didn't. We couldn't control if a bunch of people watched the game or a bunch of people didn't. We couldn't control what the referees did, but we could control our effort, our spirit, the way we communicated. There were things that we had complete control over. And so that is what we tried to measure ourselves by at the end of the game. Leadership, our leaders were expected to model that. I have a story in the compost file where I talk about if I had it to do over again, I might boil down all my standards to 3 things. And my 3 things very simply would be do your job, pick up trash, and don't be dumb. Those would be my 3 things. Because I think sometimes we get so much stuff out there that we want people to be responsible for. And then by virtue of definition, if everything's important, nothing is. So if I had it to do over again, I might say that. Just do your job, because how much could get accomplished if everybody just did their job? And it doesn't mean that you don't go above and beyond. I'm not talking about that. Work always overlaps. I'm talking about not trying to do the job that's not yours that you want to do, or the job that you think will get you something else, or somebody else's job who looks like it's more fun than yours. Just doing the job that you have to do. If you start there and do that, we have a really good chance of all ending up where we want to end up. The second part of picking up trash is it's a simple task that reveals humility. So at the end of practice, captains walked around the gym and picked up water bottles. But you know what? There weren't usually very many there because players were picking them up because the captains had taught them how to do that. It's a perpetual thing. And if you're looking around for trash, you're paying attention to what's happening around you, and you're thinking about people who come after you. You're not the most important thing on the planet because somebody else is coming later. So it keeps you grounded. And then the third part, the don't be dumb, came from a friend of mine and I who would sometimes we whine to one another like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And the kind of whine where like you really think you can, but you need somebody else to say, oh, yes, you can. You're going to be great at that. Right. And my friend would just say, don't be dumb. And that would be that. That'd be the end of it. There would be no whining. There would be no carrying on. There would be no complimenting back and forth. Okay, you're right. Yeah, I can do that. next thing. And we do it to all kinds of things, you call and they don't pick up, and you start to wonder, well, is she not answering my call? What's going on? Something came up. Don't be dumb. So don't be dumb became our way of moving on and not creating ghosts. There are enough things that stand between where we are and what we want to do. We don't need to make any things up. We don't need to create hurdles to jump over. And so our don't be dumb was a way of just high jumping right over all that stuff and getting to the real stuff, not messing with the imaginary. And so if I had to do it all over again, I think I would arm my captains with that.
Well, I love all three. I just want to hit on number 2, if you don't mind. The book came out right before Jack and I started Chicken Soup, so it had to be 1989. But it was everything I need to learn. I learned in kindergarten, and the number 1 line was, "If you make a mess, you clean it up." Mm-hmm. And when I read that, it changed my life. 1 line, because I thought, well, I'm rich. I don't need to. If I make a mess, I got a staff member that cleans it up. No, everybody needs to clean up their own thing. And then right after that, because I'd been trained in skiing by the world's top guy. He's a martial artist and 7 things, Tom Crum. And Tom Crum was bodyguard to John Denver, and he couldn't make it to an event. He said, you're now a martial artist. You're going to go guard Denver. And I go, if 1 guy comes, I can handle him. If 7, you can handle 7 in a second, because, don't be dumb. I can handle 1, maybe 2, but I can't. If they try to rush him, he's done for, and I would feel trashed. Anyhow, but what happened is John Denver that night's whole lecture was, you got to pick up the garbage. We can't allow the world to be full of garbage anymore. And it seems like such a simple motto: pick up your trash. But here you got, at one time, John Denver was a top singer, Rocky Mountain High and all that. Another time, the book was, and that's why I'm saying your book's going to be taken, read, absorbed, shared. And I want you not only to get 1 book when you go out and buy this, but I want you to get 2. And I want you to give 1 to a friend that you really love, care about, and we'll go over the contents of the book, because this book is too good not to share. Because what she said at the very beginning is, everybody's got a compost pile. Now, you may or may not write to yours, but if you haven't, this is going to inspire you to, because everyone needs to journal. She and I have talked about that. And everyone needs to have teamwork, because team, I acronymed it to everyone, together everyone accomplishes miracles, because I think you can't do it without a team. I mean, Jesus didn't do his first miracle, water into wine at Canaan, till he had 12 disciples, synchromesh, going in the same direction, until, Judas screwed that up a little bit. But other than that, so take us through how you get your teams to work all the time.
Well, I think there's every team, every group of people has a different key that unlocks them. I think that just like every family feels a little bit different than every other family, I think teams are very, very similar in that regard. And I think that in order to get them to work, and I don't know if you mean work as in function together or work as in really produce hard labor, but to answer both of those together. Well, to answer really both of those definitions, it's the same answer, is they have to know what it looks like to do it well. Sometimes we throw out things like, we tell somebody to run fast. If they've never seen anybody run really fast, how do they know what that even means? They don't have a vision for that. So we bombarded them, our players, regularly, consistently, with examples of what healthy teams look like, what hardworking teams look like, what sharing the ball looks like, what unity looks like on the floor, off the floor, constantly providing examples of that. We had a wall in our locker room where, when we caught our players, one of our catchphrases was, catch our guys doing things right. So when we caught our players, I always called them guys. It's just how I was coached when I grew up. I can't break the habit. I coached women, but I called them guys. When we caught them doing one of our standards, so one of our standards was, we are grateful. So when we captured somebody saying thank you to the bus driver, or being gracious to the high school team that came to practice to watch us, going by and shaking their hands and telling them thank you. We'd sometimes snap a picture. We couldn't always snap a picture, but with these phones, you can do that pretty quickly. And we'd put it up on the wall in the locker room, and it would just say gratitude, and we'd stick it up there. If we didn't have a picture, we'd say, Mandy did a great job with the bus driver before we headed off to Baylor, and snatch it up and put it on the wall in the locker room. And so we were constantly, this is a Bob Knightism. Teams get good at what you emphasize. We were constantly emphasizing teamwork, togetherness, unity, effort. And so those things went on the wall as a way of continually creating a visual where a player could, with their five senses, know what work looked like, whether it's hard work or functioning together as a unit. And I think sometimes we skip that, and we assume that people understand what our ending objective is. And so we tried to constantly show them that. But beyond that, it's a million one-on-one meetings, getting to know where they came from, what their family's like, what their hopes and dreams are, what makes them happy, what scares them, what makes them uncomfortable. It's all those things, and getting them to have those really rich conversations with one another, because when we know each other, we stick. That's just how it works.
So talk about traveling, because here you are traveling with women, which most parents and grandparents worry about their daughters or granddaughters traveling. I mean, you guys went to, like you just said, Baylor, but you went all over the place and did really well. How did you make sure you kept them safe and traveled well and let them yet still have great experiences?
Well, I'll tell you this. I played NAI basketball in college. I went to Oklahoma Christian College. And the way we traveled to our games was on a van. And I read Shakespeare, because it was an English major, in the floorboard of the backseat of the van with the itty bitty book light. So that was my experience for college travel. I go to the University of Oklahoma, and that's not what it's like. There's a big charter bus that picks you up right outside of your gym, and you bring your bags out, and there's managers that put them under the bins. And then that charter bus takes you to the airport, where you get on a charter airplane where someone moves your bags from the charter bus to the charter airplane, and you have food waiting for you. And then you get to a 5-star hotel, and the same thing happens. It's not real. It's like Disneyland, and it's fabulous. It's fabulous. But about every 3 or 4 weeks, my team just knew a lecture was coming about this is not the real world. When you are out on your own, you're going to know what this hotel room cost, what this meal cost. The travel was so different that I felt like it was my responsibility to constantly remind them of how fortunate they were, and to try to create some grounding, a level of expectation that makes sense in life beyond Division I BCS conference basketball. We stayed at great places. We traveled with assistant coaches, and staff members were in charge of, you have a big enough staff at the BCS level to, somebody's in charge of stretching them before they go to practice. Somebody's in charge of their meals. Somebody's in charge of the hotel. Everybody's in charge of things. So we have eyeballs everywhere. And our only real rule when we traveled was just, you never leave the facility wherever we are. We all go everywhere together. And we took some foreign tours, which are incredible luxuries. Every 4 years, I don't know, I think you can go all the time now, but when I was coaching, it was every 4 years you were allowed to go on a foreign tour. And so we were able to take teams to Greece and Italy and Australia. We went all over the world. And on those excursions, of course, we didn't all have to move together as a 27-person group all the time, but we traveled in small groups where everybody was always safe, and we didn't really have any issues. I'm very grateful to say, but it was a lifestyle it's not normal, and I felt like it was important to prepare our kids for life after Division I travel.
So before we ask you your philosophy going into the future and what you want to do in the future, tell us what you think about every kid should be in a sport, yes or no? If they can, assuming they're not a paraplegic, but then even we've got that kind of sporting going on now too. So
I think there are opportunities for growth for young people in sports, regardless of any level of athleticism or physical giftedness. I think there are so many positive things to take away. That being said, if a child has no interest in it, then they should be able to follow their passions, whatever those are. You can learn many of the same things playing the piano, or doing FHA, showing animals, showing horses, whatever things you might do. So I think parents get awfully involved and do a lot of pushing, and I think they should maybe do a little bit more observing to see where their children's passions, natural curiosities lie.
Cool. So tell us what the future holds for you and what your vision is and dream now.
Well, when I walked away from coaching, I did so to chase that passion that I carried in my pocket of writing. I've always wanted to write, and I began immediately to do that. I do a lot of public speaking. I do some leadership consulting. So there are three things that I do, three professional buckets. Of those, writing is supreme. I want to maintain that space for writing every single day. I enjoy the public speaking because it fuels the writing, because interactions with people give us juice. They just give us juice and make it better, make it easier for us to access different parts of ourselves. So I never want that to go away either. I enjoy meeting people and being in the presence of others. So that's super fun. And then the leadership consulting, I find I grow probably more than my clients do. It's just amazing when you start to think about things at a really deep level, how you notice when you're in alignment or slightly out of alignment with who you want to be and what your core values are. So that really keeps me grounded and true and growing. And I love that. Aside from that, I had my first granddaughter right 2 weeks before I retired from coaching. I now have a second granddaughter. So I have those two little ones who, a big part of this season of my life is maintaining the flexibility and availability to be very present in their lives. I told you earlier that my granny was my kid's nanny. Well, I'm getting an opportunity to be very involved in my granddaughter's lives, and that is just such a blessing. And that is number one on my priority list. But I'm by nature a striver, which is why I wrote this book for strivers. And so there's always something around the bend. There's always a project, and I'll write another book and hopefully another one. And I just want the circle to enlarge and for the writing to resonate. My writing is not prescriptive. I did not ever want to write a book in which I thought I had the market cornered on anything, because I don't. I do have experiences that I can share. And I hope that when people read my experiences, they think about their own, maybe in a slightly different way. With my mission now, it used to be grow kids, and now it's to nudge people to think and feel. And I do that by writing and speaking.
Well, I think you're still nudging everyone to grow, and no one should ever stop growing, no matter what their age. And I'm thankful that you and I are both grandparents, and if you forgive me for adding myself to it, we're both being great grandparents, GRE dash grandparents. But based on what my grandkids say, I've done a really good job. So, and same for you. There's just no question in my mind. So any final word you'd like to share with everybody out there as they are going to go out and buy not one, but like I said, two of the books, and give one to somebody that they love, care about, want to share, and want them to grow and be more than they've ever been before, because they're going to be imploding your good thinking and wisdom and leadership and exploding with better results in their life.
Well, thank you for saying that and for saying it in that way. I appreciate you and the opportunity that you've given me here to be on this with you today, and the publishing of the book itself. I'm not a social media person. It's one of the decisions that I made even while I was coaching, that I didn't want to spend my life with my face and my phone. And so I don't have a huge social media footprint. So this is very helpful for you to do this, because how does somebody who's not in the state of Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma will know about my book, I promise. But beyond the confines of these borders, how do people know about it? Well, only through opportunities like this. So I so appreciate you opening this up to your circle, and to your circle who may be listening today, to open it up to your individual circles. My dream would be for this to just have a ripple effect, because they told two friends and they told two friends and so on, like the old commercial. That would be my dream with this. But again, it's a book that I hope you see yourself in. and something that makes you think and feel and examine, and maybe that you walk away after you read it and you just notice things a little more. And if that's all, I think that's a win.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just experienced somebody that has helped so many do so much, and she is so got, oh, I love the big word, eleemosynary tendencies that she couldn't not give and help you grow and show all that you can become. You know, just it fascinates me that she's willing to pour it all into the page, her heart and soul, and you get to get all of her decades of experience. And then I said bye too, but those of you that are grandparents like the two of us are, I'm going to ask you to make sure that you read it out loud to your grandkids that are interested in sports. They may be interested, like she said, in piano. So it doesn't have to be sports, but every kid that is in sports, and I don't know what percentage that is, but I'm going to guess it's 50% of all kids growing up. I'm making a wild ass guess, as they say. They are going to love it, and they're going to be thankful, because every kid needs to read if they want to lead, and she is a leader amongst leader. So again, on behalf of all the people listening, thank you. One last final word. I can see it in your countenance.
I just want to say that this is not, I don't want to mislead anybody for them to think that it's a sports book, because it's not. It's a book about life. But there were 3 things that will be in whatever book I write. I can't not put them in there because they're so much a part of me. And that's faith, family, and basketball. It will always show up because it's been such a part of my life. So while it's not a book about basketball, there's basketball all in this book.
Superb. Okay, I'm blessing you. Thank you for being on with us.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everybody, for watching.